Good evening. Dumelang bagaetsho. Sanbonani Khwenand. So good to be with you again tonight. We have a special program for you as always, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it as I'm also and my co-pilot and looking forward to it. I'm going to have him say his greetings, and then we'll hear from you in a minute or so. And then we'll introduce our guest tonight and tell you of the good things that will be said and done tonight. My co-pilot, is your opportunity now to say hello to our precious friends at home, in offices, wherever they might be. So, welcome from my side.
Thank you, Mr. President, and greetings to those who have again tuned in. Apologies to some who may not have gotten the message. Some may be a little bit slow in getting back into the swing of things, but this is our second live stream for the year. And so we want to encourage you to tune in again, call a friend, a family member, and let them know that the ACDP is live. Because South Africa needs the ACDP and the ACDP needs you. So good evening and blessings to all those who have tuned in tonight.
Well, it's time to hear from you. Who has tuned in tonight and who wants to say hello? Well, Cas van der Bijl Math is our champion.
Yeah.
He has beaten you all, guys. He is the one who has been among the top, the first to tune in most of the time. So good evening, that's from Kaz. He says, good evening to our leadership and fellow ACDP family. Greetings from Port Shepstone in the Ugu region. Thank you, Kaz.
Good evening, Kaz. And we have Lungi Ngapi, who says, good evening, President, your co-pilot, and the ACDP family. Good evening, Lungi, and welcome.
And Nora, another champion, Nora Malitinyiko says, evening, Mr. President, Deputy President, and my beloved ACDP family. It is a pleasure to be together again. So true.
And Puti Joshi, good evening, my President and Deputy and ACDP family. Good evening, Puti, and welcome.
NPK Progress. Good evening, my President and DP, Councillor NP Kumalo, KZN, Tlaboyalingana region. God is good all the time.
Yeah. Bani Bernardo, good evening, Mr. President and Deputy ACDP family from a very hot East London. We can agree, from a very hot Cape Town.
Shoo, it's also hot here. Can you see? I'm almost sweating. Okay. Shalom, shalom, Honorable President, Honorable DP, and the lovely ACDP Solution family. Good evening, sir.
Siboniso Twala, good evening, Mr. President, Deputy, and all ACDP family. Good evening, Mr. Twala.
And that then Moses Poet says, good evening, my President and DP and ACDP family.
Christian Ralston, good evening, dear Mr. President, DP and ACDP family. God bless you all. Blessings to you, Christian.
Kiwi Fruit Maluleke, he says, good evening, Honorable President and Deputy President and all the ACDP members.
Johan Dutoit, Councillor, good evening, Mr. President and Deputy, from George in the Western Cape.
Well, those are greetings we have received so far from our friends who have tuned in on time. Those who are late, please make sure that next week you will be on time. All right, we want to start with our program tonight. We have some exciting guests. The first one we are going to start with has been with us before. Dr. Herman Edeling, our neurosurgeon. All right, let me read a few things about him, and then he is going to tell us more about the NHI, National Health Insurance. Why the national insurance scheme will fail the legal challenge. There are a number of medical groups that have threatened, and doctors, to take them to court because there are many flaws with the bill before. Now it's coming to the president to sign, and they are saying to the president, please, please, please don't sign that bill until corrections have been made. But Dr. Edeling is an esteemed neurosurgeon specializing in medical legal practice. Dr. Edeling, together with other medical doctors and lawyers, sent a letter to President Cyril Ramaphosa challenging him and the Department of Health to be transparent and to address various other safe and effective means of prevention and treatment of COVID-19 over and above the National Vaccine Rollout Program. It is reported that the letter was supported by more than 2,400 other medical practitioners. People who are saying, Mr. President, please, we need clarity. Please, we need to know what is happening. There are other means, there are other ways that can be used to fight COVID-19 infections. And I'm glad that I'm among those with my co-pilot who said, we will go for alternative available treatment. And the Lord, by his grace, helped us. We did not get it. Many of those who got vaccines have major problems that we'll hear from Dr. Edeling tonight. Before he comes on board, want to say something, sir?
Well, I think that clearly the ACDP, Mr. President, has been the only political party that has been consistent in terms of its message with regards to the COVID vaccinations in particular, where we've indicated that we wanted the vaccinations, not that we were anti-vac, but we wanted vaccinations that were safe, vaccinations that were not mandatory, and also the contents of those vaccinations needed to be made known to everyone. So our message was safe, our message was clear, and we have been proven right. We have been called anti-vaxxers, and we are so glad that we've had somebody like Dr. Edeling, who's come and stood alongside the ACDP saying that you are correct. But I met also Dr. Edeling, before you come on, a surgeon at the Durban beachfront. And he said to me that all of his family has immigrated and they've left South Africa. And he has stayed because he loves the country. He has a passport to another country, but he refuses to leave because he loves South Africa. But he says this NHI, National Health Insurance, if it passes, could just be the tipping edge for him. And so certainly, I think in terms of vaccinations and in NHI, the COVID vaccines, NHI, two crucial aspects that you also have been at the forefront. And we thank God for you, that you have been assisting and being there also to guide the ACDP. So we appreciate also your inputs.
Well, Dr. Edeling, it's now your turn and your opportunity to tell us why many doctors are saying the president should not sign this NHI into law. Over to you, sir. Among others, obviously, it was reported this past week that there are more than 3,000 qualified medical doctors who are unemployed. How do you make NHI to work when you don't have doctors to make it work, to help make it work, when you don't have enough medication, when you don't have enough health workers? So what government is trying to do, many are saying they're just trying to win, to score votes, cheap votes, by saying to people, you're going to get free access into any hospital that you are thinking of. Okay, tell us the truth, sir. Are people given just high hopes? Are they being lied to? Are they being deceived? What's happening? So, Dr. Edeling, that's your opportunity, sir.
Thank you very much, Reverend, and thank you for letting me be here. You are quite right, they are being deceived. When I don't call myself a mind reader, so if we want to look at why are they deceiving the public, one can think of various motivations. and one of them could possibly be electioneering. There are other motivations that also come to mind, but as I'm not a mind reader, I'm not going to speculate on those. You are also perfectly right in raising the issue of all the qualified doctors in South Africa who are unable to get employment, and where they've been told they can't get employment because the department hasn't got enough money to pay their salaries. Now, that is a major problem. You probably are aware that the United Nations has set out guidelines as to how many doctors there should be in any country per 100,000 population. Now, you may not be aware that South Africa at present falls way below the United Nations standard for the number of doctors per 100,000 population. And it falls way behind other Western countries who have higher than that number of doctors per population. And when I say doctors, that is only one element. There are other healthcare practitioners, in other words, nursing practitioners, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, pharmacists. There are many kinds of healthcare practitioners that are necessary to provide proper health services to the population. I also know, and you would also be aware, that in certain of those Western countries where there is nationalized type of health services, in some ways similar to this NHI bill proposal, there are major problems and the public are dissatisfied, and there are major problems in the implementation and the mechanism of service delivery. So if a centralized social health system doesn't work in rich countries who have more than enough healthcare practitioners, how on earth is it going to work in a poor country like South Africa with not enough healthcare practitioners? So that's just an introductory remark. Now, Reverend, I fully support the stated intention of the NHI bill, which is to give high-quality universal healthcare to all, irrespective of who people are, where they come from, how wealthy or poor they are. That is a noble goal. That is in line with our Constitution. So the stated intention is good and should be supported. However, doctors know, and many other people know, that that goal cannot be achieved by this NHI bill. It is impossible. So let me go over some of the reasons that I say that. First of all, I'm going to speak with a goodwill assumption. In other words, I'm going to talk about the NHI bill if it were in a context where the South African ANC government was a good government with a good track record in administration, in parastatals, in all departments of state. If it was a good government which the population respected and trusted, I would be against the NHI bill. And the fundamental reason for that is that the bill seeks to restrict freedoms that are guaranteed in the Constitution. So it seeks to restrict the freedom of doctors and other healthcare practitioners to practice as independent professionals. It also seeks to restrict the freedom of patients to choose their healthcare practitioners and the hospitals or other facilities that they go to for help. Now, nothing that restricts constitutionally guaranteed freedoms can pass the South African Constitution, because those freedoms are guaranteed in the Constitution. So for that reason, I would be against it. The other reason that I would be against it is the simple reason of what motivates people to do high quality work. Bearing in mind that the goal of providing high quality medical services to all is dependent on professional healthcare service providers being personally motivated to provide such services. You can't provide services with money. Money is an important currency to pay healthcare providers, but the quality of healthcare that is provided depends on the motivation, the dedication, the attention to detail of the healthcare practitioner. And you will know that professional people of all kinds, not just doctors and nurses, all professional people provide better quality professional service when they are able to work independently, when they have to take accountability for their actions, when they receive praise for good work, where they can get into trouble for bad work, but where they are personally and independently responsible for the quality of their work. That is why many professional people in any country prefer to work on their own for themselves, where they are personally responsible and independent, than to work for the state. There are certain professionals who prefer to work for the state or who prefer to work for large corporations or companies. Those who wish to do that, they give their good services in that context. But many, many professional people, and specifically doctors, prefer, for whatever reason, to exercise their freedom of choice to practice independently for their own account, which means they are accountable and they make the decisions about their practice. Now, a system like the NHI proposes is effectively imposing a communist system of healthcare, where all healthcare providers, all facilities, all professionals, all medicines, everything is under the control of the state. Now, communism has not served the interests of poor people or middle-class people in any country in the world. And to try and introduce a communist state-controlled system of healthcare will fail for the same reasons that communism has failed in other countries, and that communism has resulted in poverty and unemployment in many countries. So all of these comments I've made are with a goodwill assumption. So even if the South African government was perfect in all ways, these comments would apply. But now, unfortunately, we must move on to the reality. The South African government is not perfect. The South African government's track record in terms of state departments is, quite frankly, atrocious. There has been maladministration and corruption. And that's not my opinion. We know that the track record of the South African government has been maladministration and corruption. This has affected mostly the poorest people in the country. And it's been going on for a very long time. Now, the NHI bill seeks to place complete control of all healthcare services in the country for every citizen of South Africa under one office inside the Department of Health. So the control of all healthcare services will be in a centralized, state-controlled office in the Department of Health. In other words, subordinate to the Minister of Health. Can we trust that? So let's look at the track record of the South African Department of Health. And I know this because I've been intimately involved with this for many years. The South African Department of Health has a dismal track record in terms of maladministration and corruption. I want to start off just briefly. In March 2015, the then Minister of Health convened a summit, the Healthcare Summit in St. George's Hotel in Gauteng. I was there on behalf of the South African Medico-Legal Association. We debated for 2 days trying to get a document to address the problems. They were very serious problems. The 2 days were not enough. That resulted in the Minister of Health appointing a ministerial advisory committee, of which the chairperson of SAMLA, the late Judge Claassen, was on that committee, and myself and many other directors of SAMLA at the time spent a tremendous amount of effort over a number of months collating, reading, thinking, writing, formulating concepts for how to improve the service delivery in the Department of Health, specifically how to address problems of patient safety, how to address problems of administration, and how to address legal problems. That process took about 15 months. And in July of 2016, the Minister of Health signed a document which was called an implementation plan in July 2016, which had very cogent and very sensible, rational instructions for what should be done to improve patient safety in the departments of health, to improve administration in the departments of health, and to improve legal problems in the departments of health. And when I say departments, that is because in addition to the National Department of Health, we have 9 provincial departments of health, which all are virtually independent. Now, I stayed close to these developments for years. By 2019, it was apparent that not just the recommendations, but the instructions of the Minister of Health in that 2016 implementation plan had not been implemented. You can understand the tremendous disappointment that all of us who had spent so much time working and giving this input to the Department of Health experienced, because I don't know whether there was no political will, whether there was no capacity, whatever the reason, doesn't matter, and that's not what I'm addressing. What I'm addressing is that when the Minister of Health knew there were very serious problems, they were not money problems, they were professional problems, they were administrative problems, legal problems. When he knew that and spent a lot of effort to work out a plan, and that plan was made, that plan was not implemented. 3 years later, when President Ramaphosa became president of South Africa, we were approached, the Medico Legal Association, were approached by an intermediary to say that the President Ramaphosa is aware of serious problems in the medico-legal arena. In other words, the issues of clinical negligence and personal injury issues, which are both health issues. We convened at short notice a colloquium of top representatives in South Africa of 17 stakeholder organizations that all came together on a Sunday in Gauteng to address the president, because we were told the president wants to understand this, he's going to attend. People flew in from around the country. We put together a full-day program to address the president. Of course, he did not attend, but the Director General of the National Department of Health did attend. Various other government officials were relevant, were also invited to this event, but they didn't. The Director General did attend. Following this, we wrote letters to the President. And Reverend Meswe, you referred in your introduction to a letter that I wrote to the President in 2021. I'm now talking about a previous set of letters that myself and Judge Claassen wrote to the President in August 2019. That was before the COVID problems, and we were addressing the medico-legal crisis. We wrote to the President with a huge dossier of very well constructed and organized plans and reasons and explanations about how to sensibly address the medico-legal crisis. And just to get an idea of how big the crisis was at that stage, and that was in August 2019, the clinical negligence crisis was such that the national and provincial departments of health had a contingent liability of more than 90 billion rand. Contingent liability means when the lawyers added up all the claims against the departments of health for clinical negligence, for compensation, for the harm associated with clinical negligence, the claims added up to more than 90 billion. There was also a huge amount in the private sector, but we didn't know where to get that. So the contingent liability of private healthcare practitioners in 2019 was unknown to us. What we wrote to the President was this: as staggering as these financial losses may be, the numbers do not reflect the extent of human suffering and loss of economic productivity by those citizens who are disabled by medical negligence. We are acutely aware that the harm is perpetrated or aggravated by unprofessional conduct, negligence, corruption, maladministration, and constrained resources. In this letter and all the supporting documentation, we presented to the President and the Minister of Health and 5 other ministers, we presented a basket of sensible recommendations. We also offered our help as senior and experienced practitioners in relevant fields. This whole presentation was totally ignored, which is the same, Reverend, as occurred 2 years later when we wrote to the President about the COVID vaccines. Now, as part of the initiative of Minister Motsoaledi in 2015, he set up a very good thing, which you may be aware of, which is called the Office of Health Standards Compliance, OHSC. Essentially, the Department of Health drew up healthcare standards. So they drew up standards for doctors, for nurses, for pharmacists, for food provision in hospitals, for maintenance of hospitals, for hospital management, for hospital accounts, for hospital security, for all aspects of healthcare provision. The Department of Health drew up a set of standards. And then the job of this Office of Health Standards Compliance was to inspect and audit state health facilities around the country and score them according to a scorecard to see how they complied. Now, bearing in mind that the crisis meeting with the minister was in March 2015, and the minister's implementation plan was signed in July 2016, I have in front of me a document called Inspection Results of the OHSC, which covers the period 2012 to 2016. So over that period, 2012 to 2016, they audited 1,887 facilities around the country. And they graded them according to a system, in other words, by what percentage they complied or failed to comply with the published standard of the South African Department of Health. And any hospital that scored 80% or higher was called compliant. That was regarded as excellent, and they were graded A. Facilities that scored 70 to 80% were regarded as good, and they were classified as compliant with requirements. So there were certain things they were told to improve or fix. Those that scored 60 to 70% of the national standard were classed as average, and they were called conditionally compliant. Now, if we look at all of the facilities that scored either A, B, or C, in other words, compliant with requirements, or conditionally compliant, in other words, 60% or above of the standard, we find that of the 1,887 facilities inspected, only 301 complied with that standard of 60% or above. That means only 16% of the hospitals that had been inspected reached an acceptable, even though poor, that average standard of 60 to 69%, which is called conditionally compliant. So the conditionally compliant were 171. The compliant with requirements were 91 facilities. And of the top grade fully compliant, there were only 39, which means only 2% of the facilities were properly compliant. 7% were good or excellent, and 16% included the 60 and above percentage. So 84% of healthcare facilities in 2016 were either conditionally compliant with serious concerns, or described as non-compliant, or described as critically non-compliant. And the numbers in each of those categories, the lowest category, critically non-compliant, was the biggest single number, which was 660 facilities. So you will understand that according to this, the national and provincial departments of health had failed abysmally in their constitutional imperative to provide quality healthcare services to South Africans. And this was not somebody else auditing them. This was by their own audit. Now, the results of this audit in 2016 were so disappointing, or should I say so embarrassing, that whereas the Office of Health Standards Compliance was supposed to do regular annual follow-ups and re-reporting, one couldn't find that in 2017 and 2018 and 2019. I looked for it on their website. They just didn't publish anymore. Eventually, I'm not sure if it was 2019 or 2020, the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee put pressure on them and insisted that they come to the committee to report, which they did. And then they prepared some kind of report for Parliament, but it was not of this nature. In other words, a complete audit of healthcare facilities. It was a watered down kind of a report, a wishy-washy report that said this has improved a bit, that hasn't improved so much, but it didn't give the same pattern. So one could not compare the results at that stage with the dismal results in 2016. Now, you know very well, Reverend, and you've spoken about that, so I won't take a lot of time saying that in 2019, I wrote to the President about the lack of safety and effectiveness of the COVID-19 vaccines. I also wrote to the Minister of Health. Both of them were very well supported with evidence, with references. It was not opinion sucked out of my thumb. It was all analysis of available data and documentation. We were totally ignored. Now, it has subsequently come to light. Bearing in mind, my letters to the President and the Minister were respectively in August and September of 2021. But in March of 2021, in other words, months before my letter to the President and Minister, the Department of Health signed a contract with Pfizer Laboratories, and I have a copy of that contract in front of me. It is a shocking contract. I'm not sure how much you are aware of in that contract, in which Pfizer was given immunity from any liability if their vaccines would cause harm to South Africans. Now, there are many shocking elements in that contract, and I'm just going to mention 3 or maybe 4 of them. The first one, according to the contract, when the government bought the vaccines they were buying did not exist. They were described in the contract as aspirational in nature. So in March 2021, the South African government, through the Department of Health, agreed to buy vaccines that were aspirational in nature. Number 2, the government bought vaccines while they and the manufacturer agreed in this contract that the vaccines may not be successful. Now, I think we all remember how we were told by the Minister of Health, by many officials in the Department of Health, by many professors working for universities in South Africa, by professors on the Ministerial Advisory Committee for Vaccines, etc., over the television. We kept on being told that we must all get vaccinated because the vaccines are safe and effective. We don't have to think or speculate. We know that those were lies, because that occurred after the Department of Health had signed a contract which admitted the manufacturer said the vaccine may not be successful. The next thing I want to draw attention to is in the contract, the manufacturer Pfizer said that the long-term effects are unknown, the long-term efficacy is unknown. And in addition to thereto, they explicitly excluded serialization of the vaccines. That is shocking. Any drug, anything that is sold has got a serial number, so that if anything goes wrong, one can identify the particular batch, the particular sample, where it comes from, and analyze it. But in this contract, the South African government agreed to exclude serialization of the vaccines that were given to the South African public. So, Reverend and listeners, you will understand that at this stage in 2024, I cannot trust the South African Department of Health to do anything right. And particularly, I cannot trust them to nationalize the provision of healthcare services in the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, but that is shocking. We are led by a government that lies to their citizens so blatantly. I pray that many South Africans should come to know what we have heard tonight, so that they will say, not again, not again. We cannot trust these governments, this ANC government, with the future of our children. Well, thank you very much for all that information. I'm sure there are questions. Before we allow Dr. Edeling to leave, please write down a few questions, pressing questions, urgent ones, so that he may answer and respond to your questions before he leaves. I greatly appreciate what you shared with us. I see Marianne Lotta says, I cannot trust the ANC government with our healthcare. You are not the only one, Marianne. I also, and most people who heard the presentation tonight, cannot trust them. That is why we need to say, guys, we want change. These guys must go. We want change. Change. They've deceived our people, lied to our people, and tried to force our people. You know, maybe before we take the first question, as we campaign this year, we are going to tell South Africans that it is only the ACDP, who fought against mandatory vaccinations. If it was not the ACDP, every one of you would have been vaccinated by force. And your children today would also have been vaccinated. But thank God for the ACDP that has eyes to see ahead. We said from the beginning, until we know what are the contents of these vaccines, we don't want them. And we have been proved true. So, ACDP, particularly these new parties that are saying, ACDP has failed us. What has ACDP done? Friends, mandated vaccinations, that's one of the important things that the ACDP did for South Africans, that nobody should be vaccinated, kankani, or by force. Well, thank you very much. I don't want, you want to say something before Dr. Edeling come back?
Just quickly also, Dr. Edeling, you mentioned the fact that the NHI is synonymous with a communist system of healthcare. The government, South African government, and ANC in particular, have consistently said that NHI is working in the UK, and UK is not a communist government. So, but I also understand that the UK NHI system has its challenges. So can you just maybe speak to that? You know, UK is not communist, but there are also challenges with regards to NHI. And then maybe secondly, with regards to the COVID vaccinations. Many people are wanting to know what it is that can be done. They did not have the information. They believed government. They took the vaccination. They have complications, or they have relatives that have complications. What is it that can be recommended that they do health-wise and legal-wise?
Certainly. To go to the first question, I did say, and I do believe, I said the concept of the NHI is a communist healthcare concept. You will also appreciate that if you study this bill carefully, it doesn't exactly explain any of the detail of what it's going to do. It's like an aspirational thing. It's like a pie in the sky. It says what it wants, but it hasn't got a roadmap of how it's going to get there or exactly what it's going to do. So whether at the end of the day it's going to comply with the definition of communism or socialism, I don't know. Not that I personally see much difference between communism and socialism. But the national health system in the United Kingdom is undoubtedly a socialist health system. Even if the government is not called a socialist government or a communist government, the healthcare system under that national health system is socialist or communist. But in the United Kingdom, people who can afford it do have the freedom to purchase private healthcare. So that's why the rights are not taken away. Most people in the United Kingdom cannot afford to do so, but anybody in the United Kingdom has the right to do so. Now, in this NHI bill, there are elements of it looking into the future which suggest that at some stage, depending on how far it develops, those rights will be taken away. The rights for private medical schemes to exist will be taken away. So you can argue, anybody can argue as much as they like about whether it should or shouldn't be called communist or socialist. What I'm saying is that fundamentally, it doesn't work to try to centralize healthcare under a state authority. Whatever name you want to apply to that thing, it doesn't work. The primary reason that it doesn't work is that healthcare practitioners lose their freedom, they lose their independence. They have to follow the instructions of the Minister of Health or whoever the minister appoints as the SAR or the commissioner or the administrator of the healthcare services. Professional people don't like taking orders of how to run the day-to-day minutiae of their professional practices. And therefore their motivation declines, and therefore the quality of their services decline. You can't force people to give good quality work. People give good quality work when they are motivated. By whatever motivates them, they give good quality work. And that is the most precious thing of the South African healthcare system, is the quality and the motivation that exists in the South African healthcare practitioners. That motivation should be cultivated and rewarded and encouraged. But to put them all under the control of somebody who sits in the office of the Minister of Health is going to have the opposite effect. Let me get to the second question. Yes, a lot of people have received the mRNA injection, which, as I've said before, should never have been called a vaccine, but anyway, that is what it is called. Many people who've received it have been fortunate in not having suffered any adverse events so far. And for those that are so fortunate, I really hope and pray that that good fortune lasts, because there are, of course, risks of late onset of complications following these injections. But what you really asked about is people who have suffered complications. There are medical means of treating those complications, of reducing the amount of spike protein in their body, of reducing the autoimmune reactions, of treating the blood clotting disorders, of treating the immune suppression issues. There are ways of treating that. They are not very well developed ways, because this pandemic of vaccine injury is a new sickness in the world. So the doctors who have been able to apply their minds to how to treat this only became aware of this need since 2021. And also, all doctors who have been trying to apply their minds to how to treat it. And there are many brave doctors, and you know who many of them are in South Africa. They have been vilified and criticized and marginalized. They've been censored. Even the HPCSA has abused its authority by trying to punish them for treating patients. So it has been difficult for doctors to develop treatments for vaccine injury. But nonetheless, there are doctors who do that. And there are a number of doctors, if you may be interested, if you wish, for us to provide you with a list of names and contact details of doctors that we know. I can also provide you with other organizations who do have knowledge of doctors who treat vaccine injury, and you can provide that information to anybody who will benefit from it.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think we may have to have Dr. Edelin come again. There are a number of questions that I know some of you have that we might not have time to deal with tonight. And also contact details of those doctors that are willing to help those who are battling vaccine injuries. We are definitely, as he said, going to make that information available to you so that if you have a colleague, neighbor, or family member that is having these injuries, that they can be referred to the right people who can help them. But can you imagine government vilifying doctors who are trying to help? I mean, that is evil. That is wrong, you know. But the Lord helping us, we want to also be an extended help to assist those who are battling. So those who know, just write in so that we can know that you definitely need the information and you want him back. Send your information to, they will put in the email address on the screen. That email your questions to info@acdp.org.za. If you want that information, that is the email address to write to. Dr. Edelin, thank you very, very much for your presentation tonight. Time has gone very, very fast.
Mm-hmm.
We appreciate every minute of what you spend with us tonight and every information you have given us. It has been very, very helpful. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
We will keep in touch, and I'm going to ask you back.
Am I done?
Thank you, Sam. Good night, and God bless.
Good night.
Thank you. Okay, good night. All right, now we are going to tackle the second challenge we have. This challenge has come about because of some of our ACDP members who went to Groblersdal this past week. They say to go and pray for peace and order, because they saw what happened the last time when the matter of attempted murder of farmers who are trying to, who attack somebody. You know, I don't want to go into that myself. We have people who have the details that will tell us what really happened. But the most important thing, and the reason why we are bringing this matter up again, is that there are people who are trying to paint us with a brush we do not like, who are saying the ACDP supports the EFF and the ANC. Now, the ACDP has never ever supported EFF or ANC, and the ACDP will never do that. All right? Something that we need to remember. One of the past elections, I think, I'm not sure the DP whether would remember, when the DA, the day before the elections, released a statement in the papers about us that the ACDP supported the ANC in a particular municipality. And people were upset with us. And some of our voters did not vote for us that election. Why? Because they were very strategic in bringing that lie to the public. They brought that lie knowing that we will have no opportunity to respond. And our members became angry. And out of anger, they didn't vote for us. We want to make sure that these elections, our people must be very careful, very, very careful, that our enemies and our opponents are looking for opportunities to either twist our statements or to say things that we did not say. So we need to be careful when there are protest marches, how far do we stay away from those we know our members do not want us to support. Okay, having said that, I'm not sure whether the leader of Limpopo is online, because this matter I'm raising now happened in Limpopo, and if he's online, he needs to tell us exactly what happened. And if he's not available, we were going to have 3 people: the provincial leader, the provincial whip who investigated the matter, and we also have the national whip, who is Joseph Temlet, who also looked into this matter. Now, others might be having connectivity challenges, so we're going to allow our whip to tell us exactly what happened. Is it true that our members went there to support the ANC and the EFF? Please give us the facts as you gather them on the ground. Welcome.
Good evening, President and Deputy President, our MPs and leaders, and of course, all our nation builders who are part of this live stream. Such a joy to be on the platform with all of you this evening. Not a joy to having to defend ourselves for a good intentional setup in Groblersdal last week. Some of you may recall that the week before, chaos broke out in the Groblersdal court precinct due to political parties like the EFF taunting the opposition farmers who were there to support those who had been charged with assault with intent to do grievous bodily harm. Unfortunately, the newspapers also got things a bit mixed up, even although both farmers who were taken into custody had previous separate charges of alleged attempted murder, and this is where the confusion came in. However, because of that chaos, our ACDP contingent in Limpopo, along with our leader there, Joel Makola, and also the whip, took a contingent early last Tuesday morning, I think it was, in order to take time to pray within the court precinct for peace and order. They were the first to arrive. They were positioned by the SAPs who were there as well, expecting that there may be chaos again. And they had began praying and seeking the Lord for peace when the other political parties arrived, being the EFF and ANC. And we know what their modus operandi is, especially in the silly season that we're in. There are elements that are out to provoke and get negative reactions. Besides them, were also elements among the conservatives who were also there seeking to exploit our presence there. And because of that, our leader, Limpopo leader Joel, went to SAPS to sign an affidavit to, again, just underscore the purpose of us being there. But certain disingenuous leaders took videos of our contingent standing there and also praising the Lord, but were made to look like they joined the ranks of the EFF and ANC. So as our president has said, that is never our position. We would never join ranks with the ANC or EFF, knowing what they stand for and their anti-Christian values and policies. So we applaud those who went there with the correct purpose and the correct intentions. And unfortunately, look at those who sought to exploit us, but also, as the president cautioned us, not to jump on the bandwagon or think the worst of us first. If you're an ACDP supporter and nation builder with us for godly governance, then the right thing to do is always believe the best of your family until proven otherwise. So there's a verse in Proverbs that says it this way in the Passion Translation: the first to speak sounds true until you hear the other side of the story and they set the record straight. So we had to do a lot of setting straight of the record that was brought in terms of those who disingenuously tried to ambush us or paint us into a corner negatively. I serve on a ACDP citizen strategy group, and I can tell you that group was buzzing with all kinds of comments the whole day about why isn't the ACDP saying this? Why aren't they doing that? And folks, I want to say, let's be patient, and also let's be careful too, to be slow to speak and to be quick to support what is truth and what is righteous. So we commend our contingent in Groblersdal because in the end, they achieved the purpose for which they went. Order was maintained and peace was maintained. There were allegations that we were part of the contingent that broke through the police ranks to gain entry into the court. That is also not true. We stayed outside the court precinct. In fact, none of the ACDP members, even invited in by the police into the inside of the courtroom, declined to go in because they did not want to be associated with the EFF or ANC contingents who were in. And there were only a certain or limited number of folks from each party that were allowed to come in and be part of the court hearings. So well done to our ACDP contingent for holding good under the criticism. But as our president has said, we do need to be very careful in the season as we campaign for godly governance. We know God is a solution. We know the ACDP provides that solution through the word of God and through our Lord Almighty. But we also have to be practically aware of the wiles of the enemy and not be deceived or not be led astray, and be careful of our actions wherever we are campaigning, that we are not made to look like we could be part of something that we're not. So, President, I want to hand back to you, and happy to take any questions further on this topic if there's time.
Thank you very much, Whip. If there is one question, we have a minute for a pressing question. But it is true that if we follow the dictates or the teaching of scriptures, we will be safe. Don't be quick to believe the first person to come with stories. Some will lie deliberately to cause confusion. So I also want to appeal and read the scripture that my brother quoted. All right? Proverbs 18, verse 17 says, now it talks about the lawsuit. In a lawsuit, the first to speak seems right until someone comes forward and cross-examines him. The first person to speak sounds right. It's true. I did not know this. Something said about me or about the DP. You jump and say, I did not know the president was like this. I did not know the DP was like this. You need to hear what the DP has to say about the allegation, hear what I say about the allegation before you make a conclusion. It is a biblical principle. The first to speak will always seem right until the accused come forward and say, hi guys, they say they saw me at Sun City with another woman when I was in Groblersdal or when I was in Cape Town, and there's no Sun City in Cape Town, okay? So please, before you believe rumors, listen to the other side of the story. Okay, we are going to conclude with this one. I don't see any question coming up now. Next week, okay, and Ntabi Sensikano, true. Even media can distort facts. You are right, Ntabi saying. That's why both parties are given the right of reply. You are a star. Thank you very much, ACDP Limpopo. Our supporters were still asking for clarity from the ACDP on this matter. But this is a great opportunity to reaffirm our policies and our Christian commitment. All right? Let me say it again one more time. All right? The ACDP has never supported, to my knowledge, I don't know some people on the ground, but from where I see it, our policies do not encourage or allow anybody to support the EFF or the ANC. And we are not going to do that. Anybody who does it, in spite of what we are saying, obviously, the whip will have to use his whip to ensure that that person is brought back to life. Okay? We do not support those parties because those parties are not builders. We are nation builders. They are destroyers. We want to build this wonderful nation. We want to assist. That is why we will not side with destroyers. We must tell all our farmers, regardless of their color, farmers, black and white, and their workers, we love them and we support them. In Parliament, we can ask for any speeches that we have given. We will always support our farmers and their workers because they're doing a great job. None of us would be healthy because of eating healthy food if it was not for them. So our farmers need help, they need support, and their workers. So we want to do that. So as we close, I'm going to ask my co-pilot to say his last shot.
Well, I want to just emphasize what our president just says. The ACDP categorically, the ACDP emphatically will not and has not supported the ANC, neither the EFF. And if one looks, we've made those particular statements on media, live interviews where we were asked the question, and our policy has not and will not change with regards to the ruling party and the EFF. So my closing words to you is, this is a critical moment. It is an Esther moment. It is a Nehemiah moment for us, where the walls of South Africa need to be built up.
Sure.
And the ACDP needs you. South Africa needs the ACDP, and the ACDP needs you. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Tell your neighbors, tell all your friends, South Africa needs the ACDP. I promise you, this is a truth. This is a fact. South Africa needs the ACDP. And who does the ACDP need? You, your family, and your neighbors. Please tell them that to help build this country and make it one of the best countries in the world, to make South Africa a model nation, South Africa needs the ACDP to do that. We are builders and not destroyers. The Lord bless you. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Next week, we'll be back again with a very, very good program. Ensure that those who did not tune in tonight because they had forgotten or they did not know, we are back online. Tell them the ACDP is back online, and it will be good to see them, to see you all next week. The Lord bless you. Good night, and God bless.
God bless
Sleep
you.
well. Should I say sweet dreams or Holy Spirit inspired dreams?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe it's better. Holy Spirit inspired dreams. No demon should interfere with your dream tonight. All right? The Lord bless you.
Right.
Good night.